Hello, welcome to Unite Now. We're having conversations at the intersection of leadership and flourishing. And this series of conversations we're having are all about collaboration. And I'm super excited to have Benjamin Wills with us here for this conversation. The work that he does has been heavily collaborative with other stakeholders. And so just excited to learn from you and talk to you today. So thank you for being with us, Benjamin.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yes. And Benjamin is the founder and head of school at Peace Prep Academy. And so maybe, Benjamin, you could tell us more about yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, what Peace Prep Academy is, and what you're passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Benjamin Wills. I'm first and foremost a dad. I've got 5 kids and a husband, and a person who has passionately been trying to pursue Jesus and finding people on the margins and being impacted deeply by Jesus that is in the people on the margins. And so my life was sort of interrupted during Bible college when the Lord started to call me into the inner city. And so my wife and I moved to this neighborhood called English Avenue on the west side of Atlanta 16 years ago, about, and just started to follow where the Lord was leading. And so a few years after that, that led to the planting of a school called Peace Preparatory Academy, where we educate whole children, support whole families, and provide growth and change opportunities for whole communities in a high quality Christ centered learning environment. And so we do that primarily through school and after school. And then about 4 years ago, we started doing some community development work, affordable housing work essentially, around our campus to really focus on the lived environment that people were experiencing as well. And so, really, all of this has been about creating an ecosystem where flourishing would be the intended purpose and not like an accident or an interruption in someone's life, but that we as would call other people of God into restoring, redeeming, and renewing work for image bearers of God, because we believe uniquely that God cares about all people and all places, because God made all people and all places.
Hmm, that's a beautiful vision. I mean, that's incredible. Um, and it just feels like a lot. Like that's a lot to see happen in a community. And so I'm wondering, I mean, to me, there seems like there's a direct link. Like, in order to accomplish that, there might need to be some collaboration that happens with others. But maybe talk about that. Talk about sort of the role collaboration plays in the work that you're doing there, and this goal of seeing flourishing happen. And I love how you say that. Like, it's the intended purpose. It's not something that's going to hopefully happen just by accident. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think from the very beginning in our ethos, one of the things we said the very first time we had a public kind of fundraising event was, hey, listen, we've chosen a mission and vision that's too big for us to do alone. It will require the full body of Christ leaning in and all the various parts and pieces of the body of Christ. And so I've been just kind of like a bully to that point over the years in inviting people in with different kinds of skills and talents and saying everything's needed here. And so oftentimes that looks like, and I think it can be frustrating for people. They'll be like, "How can I help?" And I'm like, "How can you help? Like, what do you do? What is it that you want to offer this place with joy? What is the Holy Spirit calling you to lay down? Whether that's privilege or power or a skill or a talent, or your time or your treasure, and how can you join in the work that God's doing?" Because when I think about the word peace is comes from the word shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken, everything as God intended it to be. And so that requires that no one come in thinking that they're going to be the one thing that's the savior, but it's all of those things working together. And even in the initial vision for the school, it's rooted from God's imagination to mine in a period of time that I asked God to allow me to intentionally dream. And what I saw in that dream was 3 gears moving together, which is a visual picture of collaboration, right? If one of those gears stops, then the whole thing shuts down. And so I think collaboration is just in and through everything that we do, and it's the way that we've been able to go farther in the 7 years that we've been doing this work. I think that, yeah, there's that proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so I think the depth of programming we've been able to offer and the depth of relationship we've been able to offer to people is because of the call for others to collaborate with us and do this together.
So can you speak to that? Because I know, I've been sort of on site and I'm like, wow, this is magnificent. And but can you talk like what has happened through collaboration so far and over the course of 7 years?
Yeah, I think so. Initially, what happened is we started a school that had an after school program, and that was collaboration. Like, we found a person who was like, hey, I want to do after school programming. I will raise my own salary. I will find my own team. And we're like, great, we want to have a school. And that made our day, able to offer kids a safe place to be from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to participate in sports and activities. And that led to some conversations around, how else could we collaborate programmatically. And as we started seeing families get displaced from our community, the person that was running our after school programming was like, hey, I have a background in construction project management. I think the Lord might be calling me into helping in that way. Would there be space for that? And so we, started working on housing work and collaborating with that. And then I think, yeah, just throughout the years, in many other small ways, we've just invited people and said, well, whatever it is you have to offer, you can do that here. And so what's happened is we went from being a school of 12 kids to being a school of 70 kids. And we went from serving, 10 families to serving 40 families. And we went from families getting displaced and having to drive, an hour to pick kids up to being able to house 31, families in our community, some that are part of the school, some that are not. And it's really created this campus, this place of shalom where you can look at this corner of North Avenue and Lindsay Street where all manner of things used to happen. Now you see life and flourishing happening there. You see the gospel being lived out in real life. You see earth becoming more like heaven.
Where would someone start with something like this? And I know, again, this is a little bit off the trail, but like, where would someone start if they saw this as an option for themselves?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a really powerful question for someone to ask themselves is like, what place in the world is God calling me to bring healing? Like, how has God made me to be a healing agent in the world? Because every one of us is called to be a healer in some way. That could be a healthcare professional, that could be a business owner, that could be a teacher, it could be a real estate professional, it could be all kinds of things. And so I never want people to think like, well, I have to start a school or I have to start a church or I have to start a whatever. Like, what God has put something in you, a piece of God that is meant to be offered back to the world with joy. And so I think it starts with personal exploration. And then from there, I think the next step is saying it out loud in community such that people around you can find resonance, right? And you can start to say, oh, that God's speaking to me about that as well. And then as you start to find each other, you start to formulate that and turn that into actual plans that become something in the world. And I think it just takes a willingness to say, we're not going to just do like whatever the world is doing and just like slap Jesus on top of it. Like, we're going to actually think about what it means to be people who are transformed by the resurrection power of Jesus, indwelled with the Holy Spirit, walking this out. Like, if you read the book of Acts, I think that's what you see is like these people who saw Jesus alive, saw Jesus die, saw Jesus go to heaven, changed something in them to where they were like, oh, we'll sell all our property. We'll put all our money together. We'll make sure there's no one with lack among us. And I think we've got to kind of return to the roots of the church. Like, the church was born out of people just saying, not on our watch. Like, no one's going to be hungry on our watch. No one's going to be experiencing homelessness on our watch. And so, again, that doesn't mean you have to solve these problems globally, but you've got to try to engage them where you live. And so those things can look different wherever people are. But I think it's finding out, where am I particularly situated in the story, and how can I engage the world.
Right. That's good. That's good. And then as you were saying, even just like I think you said like saying it to people around you, but like starting then to connect with others and then eventually I think kind of to your point of like, hey, we started doing one thing and then we saw that in order really even for this one thing to succeed, we needed to have some other things in place to help bring the support or the like a more whole kind of net or picture into place for people, which then of course gets back to the collaboration part, right? Where it's like no one person, no nurse is going to do everything, but a nurse can do something, right? And so as you've been in relationship with others and collaborating with others, maybe could you just talk about some key elements that you think that have been important for like creating healthy collaboration, and even maybe just like some missteps that you've made or some things that you've been like, ooh, that didn't work. I need to sort of course correct with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of root system of this is like I think kind of revolves around two things: control and power. And I think when you think about the kingdom of God, one of the things I think you see very clearly Jesus indicating to us is that it cannot be owned. It cannot be controlled. Like you do, nobody owns it. We're stewards of this beautiful creation that God has made. And so I think where we run into trouble oftentimes is when someone's trying to control a situation or have more power in a situation and it just doesn't work. And so I think coming to a table, level setting, and kind of saying, like, what is each of us offering? How does this work? In really specific ways and speaking to those things up front, dealing with them in our own hearts and in our own lives and snuffing them out. It's the little foxes, right? I think those are the things that we often miss because it's, I mean, there's best practices. Those things are good. You can sign MOUs all day. You can have good legal language all day. But I think it really comes down to the hearts of people connecting and uniting, under the Spirit of God and saying we're going about this together. And it's not about any one person or any one system or ideology. It's about responding to the Spirit together and being open to that. And I think control and power can really strangle the life out of that really, really quickly and can make things go sideways really fast.
So churches have collaborated with you guys, right? You guys have had a lot of church partners. I'd love to hear maybe some of the ways that churches have shown up to collaborate in helpful ways with with you guys at Peace
Yeah,
Preparatory.
so I mean, I think some of the most, I hate to use the word successful, but the best relationships, the most meaningful relationships we've had with churches are ones in which the leadership staff is intimately involved in the partnership, where they care about it. They're willing to come on site, they're willing to walk the grounds, they're willing to see the need in real life and have a real conversation about what is there, what's needed, what would be a blessing, what would be helpful, and then they engage and they continue engaging. And I think there are some really incredible relationships we have with churches who have gone just above and beyond what we could have asked or imagined in the beginning of that relationship. Because again, kind of back to something I said earlier, like we often don't know what churches have to offer or want to offer until they say it. And so the churches that are willing to engage with us at that level and say, like, let's have a good dialogue about this. Those have been really helpful and really meaningful. And then I think the other side of that coin is it's harder to partner with churches who, again, just have an idea of what they want to do, and that's the only thing they want to do. And so you may meet a church that says, like, we want to, I don't know, we want to pack blessing bags for you and just drop them off. That may not be a need that we have, right? And so are they like willing to engage and like that's not a need we have, but here is a need we have, and work through that with us. Most of the time, yes, but sadly, some of the time, no. Like sadly, some of the time, it just comes down to like we'll find someone else who will take these blessing bags, and and that's okay.
That's good. I hear like that even in the that partnership, a collaborative conversation, right? Or a conversation, because I was actually when you said like, hey, what does the church want to do or what can they do? I actually have seen, I feel like it's the other side of where the church is like, hey, we want to do this. We can do this. And often doesn't take time to sort of listen to what does the ministry or the nonprofit that we're seeking to serve, what would really be a blessing to them. And so it seems like, I mean, that just gets fleshed out in conversation and
Yeah,
relationship,
yeah, it
right?
has to, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, I've had the interaction with the church where it's like a refusal for them to even come to the property or come, maybe they'll talk to you on the phone, but it can be really difficult when someone calls you up and is like, hey, we want to do something, tell us what to do, and we're like, well, why don't you come see what's going on here, and we kind of figure it out together. And so it's just, yeah, it can be awkward when somebody kind of has a pre kind of conceived idea about what it is that you're trying to do in the world, but they don't want to take the time to explore that. That can just create a real difficulty around collaboration.
And maybe, I mean, we're sort of already on the topic, but could you just speak a little bit to like when churches, like what does it look like for churches to sometimes show up in less helpful ways? And even maybe included in that, maybe list, you did mention sort of like, hey, we want to drop off these goodie bags or whatever, but like, what are the ways that churches tend to want to like, that intuitively they may think like, oh, we're going to bring blessing this way, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily as helpful as they might think
Yeah,
it
I mean,
would
I think
be.
service projects, right? I think the church service project model needs like a revisit. It's not to say that churches can't be helpful in landscaping and gardening and painting, and those things are helpful at times. But I think oftentimes there's a rigidity to the way that churches want to offer that, and so it's like, hey, this week or this day is the only day we can do this, and this is what we want to do. And we may or may not even have a budget for it. We may or may not even have an infrastructure to get the items there. And so I think just some of those things can be really a burden to nonprofits, to ministries, particularly smaller ones that don't have a dedicated staff. But even the idea that someone would need to have a dedicated staff person just to deal with volunteer projects is kind of a weird idea, right? It's like, yeah, it's just strange. And so I think that like there's a gradient of helpfulness around some of those things. Like I have done service projects with churches that were really helpful, where they were like, here's a skill we have, it meets a need we have. They can actually contribute funding towards that need, and then they can get it done at a high quality level. That's great. Sometimes you'll have somebody that will call you up and be like, hey, we want to come and do something service oriented, and like our budget is nothing, and so you have to supply it or and get it and be there and teach us how to do it, and those things just kind of go sideways really fast. And so yeah, that's kind of what is in my imagination about that.
Yeah, and I think, and you mentioned even the word burden, which I mean, I've led a nonprofit before, and I've also been on the other side where I went on mission trips or I went and did service projects. And I think from the side of the person who's doing the service project, it's like, hey, we're here to help. Like we're not really going because we want to hurt anyone, right? We're not going because we want to cause problems, and we don't even realize sort of like, oh, that would be a burden. That would like, and so, and I know you just sort of spoke to some of it, but like, what is that? What do you mean? Like, it's like, what is the feeling or the experience of it feeling like a burden when people are really just trying to help? So, can you
Yeah,
kind of
sure. I
flesh
mean, I
that
think
out?
it's again, it's just kind of a lack of contextual understanding of what it takes to do something, right? And so, like, here's an example that's like non-threatening to people. I just had to have my air conditioning replaced, right? I have no clue what all the work they were doing underneath my house, but I know they were under there for 12 hours, right? And so it would be as if I showed up and were like, hey, I need you to um, do this a lot faster, be quieter, and like uh, it needs to be like this at the end when I have no real imagination or idea for what all that takes. And so I think the feeling of it being a burden is like when you spend for me personally, I live in this community. So when you spend all of your life in a context and you kind of have an idea then of what would be helpful and what wouldn't, and someone from outside of that context comes and tries to tell you what would be helpful, the burden is that feeling of like, oh man, I don't want to disappoint you. I know it's not your intention to harm me, but now I've got to educate you. I've got to help unpack all this other stuff. It might cause some like relational tension between us, and then I still have to show up on a Saturday um, to be with you to do this when I've already been there Monday through Friday, and I've already done like the hard work of the job itself. And so I think that's the feeling of it's, and I think you named something really important is like we know it's not anyone's intention to harm us, but like we got to be the ones that tell them that also, which is also a burden. Like we carry all the water, and I think because it comes from this place of like our culture sees like resource and need in very just strange ways of like we're needy, you have a resource, and so we kind of hold the burden of like needing to kind of fit whatever you want so we can get that resource instead of just like a more open conversation of like, hey, let me understand what you do, let me be around it, let me get to know you. And I think those are some of the most meaningful relationships I have, where it's like I've met a pastor, we're walking together, we're understanding what life looks like, we're like spending like doing deep relational work that then informs the kind of service that the church does towards our ministry. And it's beautiful and astounding, and like amazing things can happen from that.
Right. And I think that it's like awesome to point out like there are ways that collaboration or churches partnering can bring incredible blessing, right? There are ways that can create this like beautiful outcome. Um, and so when you were talking about this like revisiting the service project idea, if you could sort of design how churches, I'm sorry, I'm like totally off script here, but if you could design how churches would like think about engaging with a service project, and you've said some of the things, but could you just sort of like, just kind of concretely, like, what would a service project look like if it was done in a way that like really felt
Yeah, so I mean, I
helpful?
think it would look like that willingness to do the relational work up front. It would look like a church being willing to come and experience the ministry in whatever way the ministry offers them to experience it. And so that's going to be different for every ministry, but coming, experience what's going on there, having a real conversation about what needs are, like all before you ever say anything about what you want to do, like being a listener, being a learner. And then as you listen and learn, and so now I'm being the pastor, like I know my congregants, right, or I know our people and I know what we have to offer. And so now I'm kind of telling you, hey, here are some things that we like to do or we have done in the past, do those fit, right? And then from there I'm kind of coming back and saying like, um, here's how much funding we have for this, here's the skill level we have for this, here's when we can do this. And being flexible about all of those things, I think is what's most helpful. So I think, in just a really practical way, it's saying hold things more loosely, kind of back to my earlier, like have open hands, have an open heart, as opposed to saying like, here's what we do, here's when we do it, and do you want it or not, because that just doesn't. And I think the benefit is not just for the nonprofit or the ministry. Like churches can be so blessed, like the people in a church can be so blessed, even if they're not involved in it, by knowing how their church is involved in it, right? And like there's one church I'm thinking about specifically that's in our community, that we've begun to partner with over the last 2 years, and it has just been tremendous to see people in that church who haven't necessarily engaged in the service aspect of it, but they know their church is participating with us, what that does to their faith, how that encourages them, how that makes them feel more connected to that body of believers, and how it makes them feel more connected to Jesus ultimately, because they're like, wait a minute, oh, our church is doing something meaningful in the world. This is something I want to be a part of. And so I think that there's an incredible benefit for a church, to get this right, if you will, because I think this is what people in our culture are looking for. Like, where people are like, there's enough good content out there, to catch a good sermon. Like, there's enough good worship music out there to like play it in your car. People want to be connected to bodies that are making the world look more like heaven, that are doing the things that Jesus asked the church to do. And so the benefit for churches is like you're actually doing the thing that we talk about doing. And that I think matters to people a lot right now. And people are, that's the smell test that this generation has of like, are you about reconciliation? Are you about healing? Are you about hope? Like, or are you just asking me to come like transact with you around tithe so that you can keep, doing whatever you're doing?
Right. Yeah. No, that's really good. I agree. I think there's such a longing in I mean, it's the longing for shalom that exists in every single one of our hearts, right? But I think like in this day and age, maybe more than ever, there's this awareness of like things are broken, things are missing, people are hurting, and I think that there's this incredible credibility that happens for the church, but also it's like this incredible ability then to like be able to steward and shepherd people into being able to like live more wholly into who God created them to be. And that is phenomenal, right? Um, um, anything, anything I haven't asked that like feels like would be important in this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be cool to talk a little bit about just like what is the ethos of collaboration, like theologically, why collaboration? Um, if you
Please,
want to
I
talk
would
about
love
that.
to. I mean, I would love to hear what your thoughts are, and I've been thinking a lot about this myself, so that would be a very fun conversation.
Yeah, I mean, so I think about one of the parables I think about is the parable of the vineyard owner and the tenants, right? And I think about this idea that like God has given us access to the fields, and if we can decide whether we want to be owners or whether we want to be collaborators, like stewards, whether we want to work with God or whether, like, when God shows up to get what belongs to God, we kill God. Like, that's such a crazy story when you read it. And you're like, whoa, like, and this is what we do. Like, we kill Jesus. We quench out the spirit, if you will, to use like this really Pentecostal language, when we don't collaborate. And so I think, like, why collaboration? Because it is like what the kingdom is all about. The kingdom is all about saying, I don't own this, I didn't create this, I am just here to offer blessing and call it what it is. It's good, it's God's. And collaboration is like the means to the end God has in mind, which is like nothing broken, nothing missing, everything as it should be. When we think about those passages in Revelation, like, the world doesn't get there because God just like strong arms it into being that. The world gets there because the people of God decide they want to join God in God's project. And I think collaboration is like a non-negotiable theologically. And so I think it's really important that we have these conversations and that we think about what it looks like and we think about our posture towards others, and whether we've been collaborative or not, because I think the Spirit could offer us some kind of course correction in this area.
But okay, so let's talk a little more about that because it's like, we could say, hey, I'm collaborating with God in the work that God is doing in this world, right? Um, but what about, I feel like there are some ministries, there are some nonprofits, and there are some churches who are very well resourced, and they feel like if I can just let me go, let me do my stuff, right? And I can accomplish a lot. And there are, like, legitimately, there are churches, there are nonprofits who have done a lot in the world, right? And theoretically didn't have to partner with anyone else to get it done, right? So, what would you say to that person? What would you say, like, how would you push back or challenge that person that to say, hey, go slower, have a process where you have to submit more, you have to do things less like the way you want to do them, you have to give up power, you have to like uh, so like why is that worth that? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot of what you're getting at too is like you have to decenter, right? And we're talking about this with whiteness and with all kinds of things, right? You have to decenter yourself. I think that's the call of the kingdom, is to take up your cross and die. So I mean, I think I would say to those people, I think there's always opportunity. There's always somebody missing from the table that should be there. There's a really powerful statement in community development work that if somebody's not at the table, they're on the menu. And I think that's not okay for Christians. Like, for Christ followers, there is something of the image of God in every single person breathing on this earth. And so I think for those ministries, I would say you're probably missing the very people you're trying to serve because you're not inviting them to be a part of their own healing journey. And I think we see that with Jesus, right? Do you want to be healed? Is a question Jesus asks someone. of course, right? Even Jesus collaborates with those that he's serving, that he's loving, that he's healing, that he's dining with. And so I would say to those ministries, like, your resource is great. Your resource, like, joined with God in a more intentional way, will have a greater impact and an actual kingdom impact in the world. I think about the psalm, some trust in horses and chariots, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. Like, the scriptures are to oppressed people. They are not centered on those in power. They are centered on the marginalized. And so I would say, like, if the marginalized are not lead characters in the story, and not just because you're talking about them, but because they're with you and working with you, then there's something missing of the kingdom in the work that you're doing. And I think the unfortunate reality is that in America, we have tremendous resource and we can do a lot of things completely void of the Spirit of God. And ministries can confuse provision with permission. And I think that is just a really, really dangerous thing that can happen in the world. Is you can think we have a lot of money, God's blessing us. I just don't think it works that way. I don't think that's what we see in Scripture, and I don't think that's. And I think God is going to have to uniquely deal with American Christians in the similar way that Jesus spoke to the rich young ruler. It's like, one thing you lack, sell everything and give it to the poor, right? I think the call is just always greater than what we even realize, and even when we feel like we're on the right track, we still have to ask ourselves hard questions.
What do you mean? You said if someone's not at the table, they're on the menu. What does that
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah, I mean, it means that you're looking at them as if they're like a commodity, as if you can own them or have them for a price, and that's not okay. And I think it means they're vulnerable, right? It means they don't have control, they don't have agency, and I think that is not an okay way to participate with people that God has made.
Hmm. Hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. And again, it's interesting because I don't think we do that intentionally, right? We're just like, hey, this is right. Like it's just like, well, this is just faster, and look at all we can accomplish. But I think it is important, and I think especially because um, we know, right? We know that churches they want to glorify God, and they by loving Him and loving their neighbor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is a really good conversation in the sense that like we often don't know the harm we're doing, right? Like we are actually trying to do just the opposite, and then harm happens where people feel, I mean, figuratively, they feel devoured by us in
That's
order
right.
for us to accomplish our goals, right? Like my goal is to provide something for this community. And then in accomplishing my goal, the community actually feels used or devoured by me.
And I would say it doesn't matter if the community can recognize that or not. The burden's not on the community to recognize that's happening to them. The burden is on the one with power to lay it down, right? The burden's on the one with resource to lay it down. The burden's on us to pick up our cross and die. And I think we've burdened people by and not intentionally, but the impact can be really, really harmful. I think that's where that meaningful relationship with those who walk with the people you're trying to serve is has to be the first step, because I just think my our work would be completely different if we didn't live in this community. Right? I just think there's so many things that we've chosen to do and ways we relate to kids and families that are directly rooted to experiences we've had in the community, right? It directly related to people that we know. And so it doesn't become um, just another number or another project. It's like, no, that's this child, that's this mom, that's this dad, that's this situation. Like, they're real. They're my neighbors, they're my friends. We share those burdens together, and so I just think it's a very it's it's the incarnational. It's the reason God put on skin. right? So that God could say, I understand what it's like to be human. Otherwise, this is like just kind of a weird story about a, a puppet master. But that's not the story we live in. We live in a story where God put on skin and chose to come and brown skin, right? And marginalized skin and having to run and hide skin, not powerful skin, not majority culture skin, not skin that was readily accepted. And then he challenged a lot of things. And so I just think there's so much that God wants. There's so much more God has for the church um, by meeting and knowing in a real way, in an intimate way, people who live on the margins of our cities and our subcultures.
I was even thinking this kind of goes back to a different part of our conversation, but like having been again in the shoes of someone who lived inside of a community where there was a perception that there's a lot of physical need. Like I remember as I was leading a nonprofit, like people being like, "Hey, we have all these things to donate," and we're like, "Okay, where can we put them? Like, where do we need them? Are they going to just end up in the dumpster?" Or and even like people within the community where they're like, yeah, people came by with these like boxes of food for Thanksgiving, and like three of the things are things we'll eat, right, of the 10 things in the box or things like that. Um and I think, but the thing is everybody, and this is maybe the lack of, whether it's the lack of willingness to have hard conversations, or there's a sense of like, well, let me accept it this time because maybe next time you'll come back with something I really do need or what. But like a lot of times it's like, thank you so much for donating this. Thank you so much for bringing this by, right? And so I think people can leave with this sense of, oh, I just did a really good thing, and they don't realize that whoever's on the other end didn't actually experience it that way. And I'm wondering, you said like everybody should be sort of asking themselves the hard questions, but how would they discern that? Because if I'm like, hey, thank you, thanks for so much, or if they're having the impression, and again, there's a power dynamic right there that can feel, it's at least a perceived power dynamic where it's like you have the resources, I'm in need of resources, so I'm going to, in some way, like appreciate, think, be, I don't know, something, in order to sort of not lose connection to the power, to the resource, or something. I don't know. You want to talk anything about that? I feel like talk about that just dynamic and the challenge of that, because someone could say, well, you should just be honest. Well, what if I'm honest? Well, then you just go away and then I'm right or whatever. So talk about that dynamic and then talk about like what kind of ways would people actually start to get to the root of whether they're unintentionally and unknowingly participating in some of those kinds of things?
Yeah, so I think you have to be in a relationship with people that are different from you. That's one. But two, I think that people with resources who are offering them, they can upfront give people permission to say no. Like that, even just that one sentence tagged onto an email. Hey, I have this, you can say no, right? And we've had people do that because I'm a very big believer of you teach people how to treat you, right? And so some of that comes to like, I think also on the other end of it, like nonprofit leaders have to develop some skill sets as well and saying hard things to other people. But you teach people how to treat you, and so you tell them up front, like, hey, here's how we do it, here's how we don't, here's what we need, here's what we don't, and then you hope that like that people will engage with you. And you just have to not have a scarcity mindset that like this won't be the last person that offers me something, like somebody else will offer me something too. But I think on the side of the person with the resource, yeah, I think you got to be willing to give some permissions up front, like you can say no, and this is not going to change what we're committed to doing, like, and I think again that only you can only create safety in relationship. And I think this definition of safety that I've picked up recently is, safety is the mutual commitment to repairing harm, and you can only do that in relationship. You can only do that when you say like, hey, I'm not dropping in as a one-time thing where we're going to give you these turkeys and then you'll never see us again. Like, we want to build a relationship with you over time. Would this be helpful or not? And then if they say no, that's okay. And then all you can do is like walk out what you've just said and come back to them again, right? And so I think that's the, it's like taking the burden back on yourself as the resourced person to say, I'm going to continue to pursue this even if I face a little rejection, or I feel a little rejection and I feel weird about it. um, and that is tough on both parties, because I've had people who have offered things, and I've said, no, no, and no, and no to a certain point. And there was one person I'm thinking about in particular where they kind of like snipped back at me, and I just called it out. I was just like, hey, I don't think you're used to being told no. And like, maybe you if you want to talk about that, I'm here, but like, I think you should go explore that a little bit, because like that's not good for you. um, and I think that's where I say, like, not to be negative or critical, just like, my hope is that people realize there's more for you in exchanging dignity with people in this way. And even when you said that, then you started the question, you were talking about like, I have this resource, this physical resource that I'm going to bring to this community, and it looks like it lacks resource. There's another side of that too that I want to talk about just for a second, and it's spiritual resource, right? I think a lot of times we go into communities that look physically bad and think, oh, they're lacking a spiritual resource. Like, I need to bring the gospel, I need to bring the kingdom, something of that nature. And I've just found the opposite to be true. Like, there's some of the most faith filled people I've ever met in our community. Like, there was a woman living in an apartment building we were trying to buy, and there were maggots falling from the ceiling in her apartment because something was dying above her. There was no dumpster, so the trash was piled up higher than a person 100 feet long. There were so many issues there, and she knew we were engaged in trying to buy this property. And we were walking by one day, and we said, like, yeah, we're trying. We hope to get it. And she just said, oh, you will get it. Like, I've already prayed about it. You will get this property. And there were days when we didn't have faith for it, but she did. And she held us. She carried us. And so I think that's another point, just to say, these are hard conversations, but the other side of it is you will learn more about who God is by engaging with people who are different from you, because God is in them and God made them. And I think that's really important to note. Like, that's what's on offer. What's on offer is knowing more about who God is, and that's exciting.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really important, because that impacts even the posture, right? As I come, it isn't just I'm coming with everything to offer. It's I'm coming into, and my one of my favorite kind of theological ideas around collaboration is the model of the body. And there's the passage about the head, like, if the don't say to the hand that you need to, I don't remember all the specifics, but the idea of like, I can't say that because I'm the brain, and if I'm gone, the body doesn't work, because the brain sitting on the sidewalk by itself isn't doing anything either, right? And there is a humility. There's the ability for my finger to be different from my nose, and to be fully differentiated, and yet for them both to be essential and connected in order to do to like bring flourishing. And I feel like, and we've had I think a couple of these conversations before, but like, there's all of this sort of brain science around even the sections of the brain that, like, the different parts of the brain have to sort of be able to be free to be different and differentiated, but they also have to be connected and interconnected and informing each other. Otherwise, it starts to break down, and we experience all kinds of chaos and rigidity and mental health challenges, and like uncontrolled rage, like almost any sinful behavior in the world that we exhibit at a like physiological level comes down to our brain not being connected, right, and integrated. And the same is with the body. And there's a non-Christian neuroscientist who is say, like, the two most fundamental things for flourishing in our brain, flourishing for things to be right and working the way they're supposed to be in our brain and in our relationships, is differentiation and collaboration. And I feel like in that, or connectedness, not collaboration, he doesn't use that. He uses connectedness. But I feel like in that there is a humility, there is an interdependence, there is a sense of like we just like a mutual honor, a mutual need, and I feel like just those two ideas held in tandem with each other like revolutionize the way that I understand life and people and community, right?
Yeah, and that's Dr. King, right? We're all connected in a garment of inescapable mutuality, or however he says that more beautifully than I just did. Yeah, it's just we weren't made to do this by ourselves. If you look at what God created in the beginning, it was an ecosystem. It was a system that all worked together. Every bit of it was perfect, and that's where we're going again, right? And so it's the in between where we have to take a look at things in the world and say, nah, this isn't as it should be. But what's the gap? And like, what can I do to move it a little bit closer? And I think collaboration is like a very natural and honestly just it's not that hard in terms of like humility's hard, but like working together with people is better. Like if you've ever played a team sport, like much better, much more enjoyable than trying to do it by yourself. And so I think there's just so much in this. There's so much goodness in this that is just like, yeah, this is just putting language around what God has already made to be true. And it's like, do we want to realize it's true or not? But it's going to be true either way. And so I think God is funny like that, where it's like God is totally willing to let us squirm around and try to do it on our own. And also, God is inviting us into these collaborative conversations and then ultimately into relationships so that we can flourish. And I think recognizing that like something's missing is a good part of that process.
Right. That's good. That's good. And I think that this conversation is so important because I think so many of us like the idea of collaboration just feels very sort of um, like neutral or very like take it if you want it, leave it if you want, right? Like it feels very optional. And I think that there's something really powerful in sort of shifting that paradigm to like this isn't optional. This is fundamental and it's required in order for us to both contribute to and experience the kingdom and the flourishing that God has intended for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, I think I said it earlier. Like, it is the means to the end, right? Like, you want to have conversations about diversity. You want to have conversations about whatever you want to have conversations about. There has to be a vehicle that gets you there, and I think collaboration is that vehicle. And I think that what I see Jesus doing over and over is reorienting people to this reality that it's like any means to the end is not okay. It's not by any means necessary, right? And I think that's where we see his correction of the religious leaders is like, I know you're trying to go somewhere, and that's a good place to try to go, but not that way. And so I think that's what Jesus is constantly inviting us back into this process of saying, this is where you're going, and this is how to get there. And both of those matter. Like, it's not okay. Like as I think you said earlier, like we're all trying to bring glory to God and live whole and like love God and love people, but I think God is specific about like the way that you get there matters. Like, and you can't like crawl on people or step on people that I made along the way. Like that's not what we're doing. And if yeah, like that's not what we're doing. And so I think yeah, collaboration is just yeah, I think you well said. It's not negotiable. It's not an elective course. Like it's the core content. It's like it's the meat, and we have to dig into it for
Yeah.
sure.
Yep. Thank you for taking time to have this conversation. I so appreciate it. I so appreciate the work you're doing. Um, I'm curious, do you like how would people get a hold of you if they're interested in understanding more about the work you're doing or interested in partnering or collaborating with the work that
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I mean, the easiest thing is to go to our website, www.peaceprep.com, or follow us on any social media channel. We're always posting things about how we want to engage with people. And if you go to our website, you can find my contact information there and reach out to me directly if you're interested in doing that. But yeah, would love for people to explore more and see what resonates and see what God brings up in them. But I love having these conversations with people, and I just love inviting people into what I think God's doing in the world. And I think you're doing a great job of inviting us to think about how that happens. And so I appreciate you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, have a great day. And for those of you who joined us, thank you for once again journeying through a conversation that navigates tough stuff, right? Like it's hard to sort of be disoriented in the space of like, wait, what I thought I was doing to help, you're just saying right now that it's not. And so I know that that can be challenging and can even just kind of bring up stuff in us, right? And so if it was bringing stuff up, I always like am like realizing it's good to notice it. It's good to notice what it's bringing up, and um, and you don't have to agree. We don't all agree about everything, but we just feel like so much growth and sharpening happens in the conversation and being willing to stay together with in relationship in the midst of tough conversations. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again next month.